this emperor's life turnabout from prosperity to poverty, from an emperor in his castle to a cellar in a booth. In 1903, Prince Chun had a newborn boy. He named him Puyi. However, he was not able to be with his son for a long time. In November, after 3 months from Puyi's birth, and without previous knowing, a group of guards and servant came to their home with an order from the king, Dynasty, to take little Puyi. Prince Chun was told that his son is going to be the Chinese emperor. The father hadn't the ability to refuse the king's orders, so he was obliged to swear off his son. Unexpectedly, Puyi was now going to take the reins of the country after the Qing dynasty. After he was forcibly removed from his family, the child was taken to Beijing, exactly to the royal palace, or as it was known, the Forbidden City. After a month from the incident, the 4-month child was officially proclaimed Emperor of China. For this occasion, the music and drums played in the whole city. As a member of China's royal family, Puyi had a prosperity life that offered him all that he needed and wanted. He wore new clothes every day. He had a huge number of servants who did everything for him, even brushing his teeth, in addition to the rich banquets he had in the day that exhausted a lot of money. No one could tell him no. He never had been punished, which affected negatively on his behavior. The servants were suffering with the saddest emperor and his unending orders. He did nothing by himself. Even blowing on hot soap was their responsibility. The servants were eunuch slaves. They were holding their eradicated testicles in a pendant, and they obliged to wear it in order to prove that they are truly eunuchs. His bully acts with the servants, who bore from his behavior and danger they were living with, did not stop at doing his daily needs. Furthermore, he was whipping them daily. Even worse, one of the victims died due to the vicious hitting he was exposed to. By 1911, this suffering seemed to have an end, when the Qing dynasty started to lose people's trust and faith. In October from the same year, a rebellion took place in the valley of the river Yangtze. People felt that it was time to overthrow the rulers. The king tried to negotiate with the burgeoning Republican movement, and they had a deal at the end. After 2 centuries of rolling China, Qing Dynasty abdicated and Puyi would no longer be the emperor of China, and that was what stipulated in the agreement. However, Puyi was not informed about the new changes, and he continued his life in his castle for the next 2 years, as if he was still the country's emperor. In 1914, Yuan Shikai became the president of China. Here, Puyi realized that some changes had been happening. Yet the new president was forced to abdicate too in 1916, because his dreams was not about the country's development. Otherwise, it was about his own. Also, he considered himself the only ruler, and no one could judge his acts. Yuan Shikai died in the same year of his abdication. After the president's death, Puyi had a chance to be on his throne again. Royalists tried their best to reinstall him, and they succeeded in the mission. In 1917, Puyi became the Emperor of China for the second time. Immediately, when the Republican leadership heard that Puyi was on the throne again, they went to the royal palace and they attacked the palace. The royalists tried to thwart him, however they were defeated by the attackers, and once again Puyi was abdicated. After the uprising, he retained the services of a British tutor, and he continued his life. By 1922, the emperor married a Japanese woman that he never knew before. The marriage caught the attention of the Japanese government's attention, and it helped to reduce the tension between the two governments and remedy their relations, which was fought for centuries. To firm the relation more, Puyi sent thousands of dollars to Japan in 1923 in order to make up for the damages that were caused by an earthquake devastated the city. The Japanese government appreciated his fund. Then the Japanese diplomats visited him with gratitude in return. This was the beginning of a doomed relationship between Puyi and Imperial Japan. In 1924, another rebellion was happening in the Forbidden City to overthrow Puyi another time. The rebellious gave him 3 hours to leave, not only from the palace, but leaving all Beijing, and they kept pursuing him till he left. The only place he could escape to was the Japanese embassy, and from there he went to his exile in Tianjin City. The 19-year-old citizen never lost hope of returning to his throne, though he had a high-flying life and he was allowed to have his own social life for the first time. Puyi became a ladies' man. The company and the attention of women was one of his interests. Once again, Puyi had an opportunity to be a ruler when Japan colonized Manchukuo, Chinese city, in 1931, and they thunk that the previous emperor is the suitable one for the throne. This had a community-minded purposes, so they moved him back to China in the same year. Then he became the president ceremonially in March 1934, but he was not allowed to wear the traditional yellow robes, so he wore the British uniform during the ceremony. The occupying claimed that he could improve the city because it was known that it is notorious and dangerous. As a result, things get much worse during the presence, since he never did much improvement. Puyi was spending his days in the Manchukuo's castle resting, listening to music and playing tennis. He didn't know about the outside events or the wars that were happening in the world. After 2 years from the Second World War, Japan declared war on Britain and the United States. Puyi joined Japan without knowing the realities of the conflict. He was always hiding during the war and never participated. However, he started realizing what was happening by 1944, and he had a doubt that bad things were going to happen. In August 1945, his suspicions were confirmed when the Soviet Union declared a war on Japan. Then their troops invaded Manchukuo. Puyi was abducted another time. Therefore, he escaped to Japan in the plane after his first try to flee by rail had been aborted. He left his companion and his wife behind. She tried to escape to Korea, but she wasn't lucky as her husband because she was captured and jailed. In less than a year, she was died in the jail due to starvation. The Soviets captured Puyi when he was escaping. He was kept in a comfortable place, and he had slaves as if he was not a prisoner. Also, they refused to hand him to the Chinese authorities, who asked for him many times to be tried for a treason. Then he went to Tokyo to bear witness against the Japanese in a war crimes hearing. In 1950, after 5 years in Russia, Puyi went back to China, but he wasn't judged. By contrast, the company's president, Mao Zedong, wanted him to be educated in the virtues of communism, so he sent him to a center for war criminals in Manchuria to be rehabilitated, and for the first time he was alone and responsible for his own needs. The lessons of communism through years helped him to overcome the royal love inside him. Puyi was sufficiently rehabilitated after 10 years of education, and he was allowed to return to Beijing. Then he started his job as streets cleaner in 1959. Then he had shack at the Botanical Gardens. He was earning $4 per month, and by 1964, the China's final emperor published his autobiography, From Emperor to Citizen. Puyi died in 1967 due to kidney cancer. His life was immortalized in the Oscar-winning movie The Last Emperor after 20 years after his death. The film was criticized because it ignored many abominable facts of his real story in order to give him a luster appearance. He became somehow celebrity later on, and China is less ashamed of his imperial period. The Forbidden City was turned to a museum in 1925. Puyi paid to visit his previous house,